Hey, it's Jake Rademacher, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
I love being on site. It's one thing, Jake, and you know this because you do this stuff for a living, to do this across the globe. I've interviewed people in basically all the continents except for Antarctica, right? And it's amazing to do that. But I've also gotten to a lot of states, other countries, and done the show face to face. It's always better face to face. What makes an interview better when you're like this? You can absolutely get the job done over digits, but what makes this better?
I mean, for me, it's I almost, for my documentaries, exclusively do it in person because I've got to be in the space. I've got to see the person. I have to, I would say half the questions I ask, I had no idea. I was taught you come in with a plan, just like battle. You come in with a battle plan, and no plan, survives contact with the enemy. So I write down, I journal, I think about what I want to talk about. But then when I start asking the questions, I just follow the trail. I just follow the lead. So if you say something I think is interesting, I'm going to follow up on that. And some of the most extraordinary parts of this movie, I had no idea I was going to ask that question. It was something they said. It was an emotion they had. It was something that they told me that I didn't expect them to tell me.
Right.
And then you're beyond an interview. Then you're in a real human moment and a real human interaction. And, we are social beings, right? So putting you in the place of that person and being in their space, even, you say you travel to them. I like doing that too, whether it's a war zone and that's your current home or it's your living room. I think there's something about being where you are that allows me to learn more about you and then maybe ask a question, something you haven't even thought about before.
Yeah. There is, when I worked in Iraq, I was a spy. And so my job was to interview people, right? And so all of these things you say are 100% what I do, So first off, I know what the Army's great. They're adorable. I'm very seasoned at my job. And I tell them, very seasoned at my job. And here's the 100 questions we're desperate to find the answers to. I'm like, yeah, no shit. Where are the bombs? Okay. Where are the bad guys? Okay. I'm going to not start with those questions. I know the questions to ask. And how do I know that? I'll walk around the camp and I think, where are the bombs? What's the question before where are the bombs? What's the question before that one? And I do it out loud. And even if I never use those questions, I have prepared myself by thinking through this long process, hours of how do I get to the answer for this question? And once I'm comfortable, it has nothing to do with the actual words I'm going to say. Once I'm comfortable that I've asked myself all the questions I need to ask, because I owe that to the people I'm going out with. I owe that to the people I'm trying to protect with my questions. Once I know, I have prepared myself for whatever comes out so that no matter where I go, I will find the emotion, I will find the gold, and I will excavate the gold. And so someone might tell me the truth, just kind of skimming across the top of their brain. And then when I choose to, and I don't like to control conversations, but I will punch through and drive down with them and say, well, hold on, come back. You said this. Or they raised their hand and went like this with their face. And I don't know what that means. I'm not a magical wizard who understands all body language, but I know that this might mean something. And so I'll go back and I'll ask about what the thing they said right there, because maybe they were hiding something at that point. And almost invariably, the thing that I find will allow them to take me where I need to go without me having to manipulate them with the master manipulation mind. Do you find any of that to resonate with you at all in your approach to interviewing?
So you'll see them gesture on something.
Yeah, like hands above the heart, right? That's excitement. Feet off the ground, that's excitement if they're sitting, right? And so, these things tell me that, or you made a wrinkly face expression when you were saying something. So I noted that, right? And I'm paying attention to that while I'm also paying attention to what's next. What does the audience need? What do you need? Hey, listen, by the way, Jake is here because he made this amazing film called Brothers After War. It's a sequel to his first film, and there's the posters are right there, Brothers at War. And we're going to put the links up on the show here and everything. That's why he's here. So I'm clocking these things at all times. What do you need? What does the audience need? What does my show need? All these things, but also what manners and gestures, your eyes are narrowing a little bit. And I'm like, should I shut up right now? I'm going to shut up right now.
No, what the thing that's coming to me as I listen to your question is I feel like there's this moment where a question comes to me And it's almost like, do I have the courage to ask it?
Mm.
I'll be like, do I have the balls to ask that question? You know, sometimes I feel like I've got to go deeper into something. I've got to ask a hard question. I've got to go into what is a painful memory for a vet, or take them back somewhere. And I know I've got to ask the question. So, for instance, one time I asked my brother Isaac in the first film, I asked him about the death of our brother. And he literally said, do we have to talk about that?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yeah, actually we do. Because people don't know how that ties into this whole film. And then how his death is actually what kind of motivated me to go to Iraq to tell your story.
Yeah.
So if I don't ask you this question, if I don't make you go down this road and open this wound and explore this, the film suffers.
Yeah.
And no one wants to see a film about my family and about how great we are. That's not why they're tuning in. I think my brothers are great, but that's not the point. What we're doing is I think of it as like cutting to the bone. We're trying to get to the very essence of the experience. So where you're a CIA spy or for the Army or whatever, and you're trying to get somebody who's hiding something and figure out a way to have them reveal something so you can save lives. Mine is a little bit different. Mine is like, I can kind of, usually I've earned the respect. I've gone outside the wire. I've walked a mile in the shoes. I've gone on the sniper mission. I was there when the kill happened. I've run towards the gunfire. I was there when the bullets fly. In this latest film with Gunner, 13 deployments, he was the only one who actually apologized, even on camera. We didn't end up using the film, but he apologized for not letting me interview him in the first time. He had a bad experience with journalists. Now he's all over my film because he was in combat and I was there with him.
Yeah.
But the other guys, sat down for interviews. But he's just like a magnet for combat, so he couldn't help but end up in the movie. But in this one, he loved the first film, right? So he was excited to be interviewed. He's willing to do it. He's there to tell the truth. The only barrier is my natural uncomfortableness to ask you something really tough,
right,
and maybe push past the boundary
yeah,
to get to something really real and intimate. And in this case, I brought him back to this moment that we were in combat. And I asked him about it. I was like, hey, Gunner, it might have said David these days, but I said, you remember when you were on one knee caressing the face of that wounded Iraqi soldier? And he goes, yeah, the bullets were flying, da 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 da. And I was like, David, I was there.
Yeah.
I was standing there, filming you. And for me, it was grace on earth. The way you, as a tough Marine, treated that wounded Iraqi soldier. How tender you were to his face.
Yeah.
He stops, he looks down, and he starts to cry.
Yep.
And what's happening in that moment is he's now really returning to it. He's really thinking about it. And so he's having emotions. He texted me a couple months later. He's like, thank you for coming. It really helped.
Yeah.
So my job more is to hold space for sometimes women, but oftentimes another man, to go into the deepest part of his heart or his soul and have him try to look even more into the darkness or even more into the truth and reveal it, and have us together maybe make a discovery. So for me, it's sometimes the thing I have is a natural reluctance to do that. And then I feel bad if I ask a question and maybe you start to cry. Like I have a relationship with you now. You're like a friend.
Yeah.
We've been like, we've been at war together. Like, and what's helped me with that is the seminars and the workshops we do, and working with, psychiatrists, psychologists. I've learned if there's a way to do it, and then in some ways if you're in a therapist's office, what I should do is let you just tell your story.
Sure.
So if I quietly just kind of listen, be here to catch it, be here to listen, hold space, and then you just start telling the truth. It's great for the film. What I often do right afterwards is maybe a little, first aid, psychology first aid. I'll help walk them through that. I'll spend a minute or two kind of talking through that experience, kind of helping them maybe reframe it, maybe looking at some other ways to think about it, because I want, if you open up, if you bare your soul to me, I want that in the end to be a very beneficial experience for you. I want you to get something personally out of that, out of telling your story. And I know now that that's processing, telling your story helps process your experience, which then turns post-traumatic stress into post-traumatic growth.
Yeah, it's all that is great. And I guess I don't want to challenge you on the asking questions thing, because I don't want to go down that road, but I do want to go back to the well of tenderness on the battlefield, because there is a lot of tenderness on the battlefield, and it's hard to show because we're all the desperado. There's nothing too cold. There's no ability to be too alone. I'm just going to go do this thing, but it turns out that there's a lot of love. There's a lot of comedy in combat.
Oh my God.
I mean, in the fight, you're like, dude, you were running and then you tripped and skidded on your face, and these things happen, and we all laugh about it while we're in a gunfight sometimes. But the tenderness, I remember supporting a infantry unit. These are hard ass dudes, and they have this E7, very senior E7. You're probably going to be an E8 soon, which for everybody is like the first tier of the upper management, and for enlisted people. And he's grabbing his guys before they go off camp, right? And he's got his hands on them, big bare paws, and he's kind of tugging on their gear, and he's checking everything out. Each one of them, I care about you guys. I care about you guys. And he's just infusing them with love. And I had never seen an NCO do that so intimately before guys walk off the camp or drive off the camp, whichever it's going to be. But you could tell he cared about these guys. My experience in the Army was backbiting, backstabbing. If you compete hard, people try to undermine you. And that I did. And all of my bosses, the one big unit that I was really in, they passed me around because I was hard charging, motivated, and I equaled an excellent blocks for leadership, even though I did all my own leading. And that's so I saw NCOs as being self-serving, right? But I'm in the intel world, not the combat world. And so whenever I see these stories to these guys, they're always like, no, Peter, you weren't in the real Army. You were in some kind of weird version of the Army where, we're not looking out for one another. Like, yeah, there were people that looked out for me, but for the most part, everybody didn't do that. And so my norm was that. So when I see this E7 putting his hands on these guys and clearly expressing love for them and care, he's going to send them out to dangerous stuff. But I'm going to make sure you guys are set. I'm going to make sure it's good. I'm here. I'm going to be protecting you guys, making sure you're as ready as you can be. Now get out there and go to war. And if I had a camera, I would have captured that moment. I captured it up here because it's taught me a big lesson about the love that can be expressed for people. We all lived in the same tent, bugs everywhere. I mean, all kinds of crazy things were going on, but that unit was close. Like I'd not seen, and I've seen a lot of units because I bounce around, right? And it was remarkable to me how adjusted those guys were and how well led those guys were.
Yeah, I saw that a lot, and it really surprised me. I knew LURS paratroopers are going to be tough. I knew Marines were tough. What I didn't know is that a Marine would get a bag of M&Ms from home and share it with everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
When I went out in the film to the LURS mission out to the Syrian border, and I didn't realize, how funny they are, how irreverent they are, how much they think, how one's reading the Bible, the other one's reading Catch 22.
Yeah.
And then I remember after doing that 5-day mission out to the Syrian border, going back, and I ended up staying in their barracks with them.
Yeah.
And I just you feel so close with these guys. You feel so safe with them. There's some of that bond that's there, 15 years later when I see them. Mm-hmm. So I completely understand what you're talking about. And I was embedded with the Marines. I was sleeping in the same room with them, right. Or trying to get out of the room with the one that snored really loud, and be over here in the other room. We went out with the snipers. I went out with 6 snipers. They took over a house, and you're just there in the house overnight. You're experiencing the same fear. You're experiencing the same joy. You're experiencing the adrenaline rush, the same, all of it. And that creates a bond that's really, really incredible. And then when guys were wounded, Ed Allier is a good friend of mine, and I went out with him. I got in combat with him, and he just told me a story about Gunner and was just like, that guy's put a cape on him. He's Superman. Yeah. So when you see someone like that, who another Marine you've actually been in combat with says is even more tough, even more cool as a cucumber, when you see him on one knee, being kind and being intimate, and he even says that's an intimate connection you have with another man. It's mind-blowing. Yeah. It's something that you don't see in the movies. It's an aspect of war that you really just don't expect. So it blew me away in Brothers at War, and that's why I wanted to return to it and examine that moment in Brothers After War.
Everybody should watch it. It's streaming. You can go to Amazon. I'll put the link here in a second. But want you guys to watch it. It's a great movie, and it captures a lot of gosh, there were so many times in the movie where we all felt like we were doing something. I forget who said it, but it's like, I want to be here. Was it Gunner? I want to be here long enough so that my kids don't have to come. And now my kids are here.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we all said that, like, let's just get this fixed. And part of my moral injury is I have to look at some person's face and talk to them, have them build a trust with them so that they'll tell me, and this person's Iraqi, Afghan, whatever it is. And oftentimes I'm the person that says, by the way, the Army is leaving this place right here, this neighborhood, and we're not coming back. And they're like, yes, yes, everybody says this. And I'm like, listen to me right now. We're leaving and no one's going to tell you. So I'm telling you because you're a good person. You've worked with us. And then that terror comes on their face. And I've had this conversation with a number of local elders, right? And government officials. And they say, almost to a word, almost to a man, they say, they'll kill me. And I'm like, I can't tell you anything more than that. Look, you're leaving in 3 weeks. If there's one thing that we can maybe get done, what do you want to do, right? Because I've been betrayed, and now you're being betrayed, and you're just now realizing it. And sometimes they did go back and kill that person. And by the they, not us, the them, killed him. And you take that home because I thought we were trying to fix this place. You know, I read George Bush's Decision Points book, and here's how we're going to do all this state building that we were going to do. And then I watched us not do it. And so when I kept seeing that note, there's one thing I wanted to talk to you about was there's a betrayal. There's a lack of principle by the people who are in leadership positions above us, whether they're in Congress, whether they're flag officers. I'm going to have Stanley McChrystal on my show, and I'm not sure what I'm going to say to him because he's going to represent the generals that I'm very hard on because they failed as a body to get us to figure out how to do the next thing to prepare us properly, right? And so when I see your film and I see these guys talking about that, and then the realization later on where I take this stupid plate and I smash it because it represents nothing to me. It represents the lies, you know.
Chief Turner, listen, I had somebody in the 160th SOR, you know, the secret helicopter folks. He said to me after he saw the film, he said, thank you for not making us look like a bunch of dumbasses.
Yeah.
He goes, we always think there's somebody who knows more, been more. You had the right guys actually talking about it. And I felt like it would be wrong. I would have been suppressing the truth. Mm-hmm. So Chief Turner expresses that. And there's a guy who's deployed 7 times. Yep. Chief Intel Officer. He was a Chief Intel Officer when I got there, and then he just kept getting promoted and doing even more in special operations units. But I thought it was important to let him talk not only about what happened, but also how it emotionally made him feel. Yeah. You know, when we left Iraq, and then what happened? ISIS rolled in, right? And eventually but you know, that's taken full circle because we come back to that at the very end with Joe. Mm-hmm. Like Joe says, I think we are learning. Like we did go back in Iraq, but we let them do a lot. We let them kind of take the lead. But yeah, that's something that to me, it's in the movie because the film's really about, you know, the heart and soul of our veterans. And that is a part of the war and terror heart and soul of a veteran, is that they gave their all for these missions and they bought in and they created very personal relationships on the ground. Yeah. And I don't think the American public and maybe even the politicians don't understand what their decisions they made, how it affected the vets. Yeah. That answered the call, that volunteered to be there, right? That had the relationships like you talk about on the ground, right? And you see those in my film. The translator that we cut to was the one that I embedded with. He was became a friend of mine. I went up to Kurdistan with him, right. Ali. In fact, I tried to follow up with him and find him. I wanted to have him in the movie. Yeah. I couldn't track him down. But yeah, I mean, and then, you know, same thing in Afghanistan. It's a very similar story to what happened in Afghanistan with the withdrawal there. Joe talks about that. Yeah. You know, in making the film, we went back in time and we looked at footage that wasn't in the first one. And a lot of the conversations with Joe, ironically, I'd been talking about the war with him for 20 years. Yeah. So there I was in his barracks room in the 82nd Airborne talking about the war and then cutting to the modern day. And another piece of that truth, which is so interesting that Joe hones in on, and there's a guy who's deployed 9 times, 6 times special operator. Right. And he goes, and I love our argument. And I change my point of view on the argument sometimes watching, even now, like sometimes maybe I agree more with Joe than I do with myself. Yeah. But I love the argument because it is the argument. I go, what about Syria? Like, look, there's 3 million people living in Europe where we are right now in Italy, 3 million people that weren't here before because we're doing nothing in Syria.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, how do you know you're going to back the right people?
Yeah.
How do you know you're going to create more problems? And then that leads to this argument where he goes, how many times do I have to go to Afghanistan before it's good?
Yeah.
And for me as a documentarian, I don't feel the need to push my point of view. I don't feel the need to like drive you as the viewer into a particular point of view. I didn't come into the film with one.
Right.
But what I love doing is going, here's the issue and here's the impact.
Yeah.
Here's what we should be talking about as the American public. Here's what our veterans think and feel. I want you to get a sense of that. I want a minute of that in your heart so you know where they're coming from. Because the reality is 96% of Americans don't understand that you have moral injury about that. They don't know that that hurts you, that you were all in. They don't know about that betrayal. So for me, I feel like my job is to be a conduit to that truth to them so they think about that. Because I think there's too big of a disconnect between what you're doing on the ground and how it gets back here to everyone in America.
Yeah. I had a real interesting show the other day with a special forces guy, and he's working in the AI space, trying to figure out how we're going to deploy AI. And even he and I, we had a pretty jaunty conversation, totally professional, totally fine and fun and fair. But he wants to say, like, I'm putting words in his mouth, but he wants to say, we're moving on from the GWAT. That's old news. We've gotten better at that. And I'm like, no, we haven't gotten better because we're the same people we always were. We bring the same playbook. We don't prepare. And I use these examples not to undermine his point of view, because he's super smart and we're all working on trying to figure this thing out. And maybe some forms of AI are going to be the answer. But if we haven't fixed the problems that we had before, I'll give you an example. If a tanker unit is going to own battle space in Afghanistan, right? And if the tanker motto is death before dismount, and they never get inside of a tank when they get there, like they've already dismounted, they've violated their ethos, right? Right when they get there. What did they train on when they were in NTC down the road here from us a little way? They trained on tanks and firing weapons, right? Great, all that. And then the military response would be, and the SF guy's response would be, and again, I'm not being unfair. He said this stuff, right? But I also knew to set that trap for him. And he's like, well, what if the tanks show up? And I'm like, but they don't. They don't. And this is going to be true for almost every person you'll talk to who's had any time, because I've got 1,000 combat patrols, right? Not going to find a guy who goes out in more fights than me. I have more conversations than I ever fired bullets in combat. But what did I practice the most on? What do all people practice the most on, right? So we take on this responsibility, but you can't do all of it. And you can't act professionally to do these human engagements, to build a government. Like, where's my license to do that? I've been desperate to read all the books and everything else. Where is the certification for that? We're desperate for people to fire weapons and hit targets at 300 meters. And we have specific drills to make you better at that. Any NCO can grab any soldier and say, I will now improve you. You will use the, and then they will do we don't have that for establish the government, build a fire department, set up a crime lab. All these things we thought we were going to do, we don't have professional license to do it. Now, maybe we shouldn't be doing it, but we did it and we failed at it. So we can't just say, we don't do that anymore, or we're just going to go kill people, because that's not what we do when we get there, right? We're going to engage the populace. We're going to try to fix the place that is broken now. And so maybe we shouldn't go to Syria. Maybe that is the right answer. And we allow Syria to be Syria. Maybe we should. Because what happens if we stay, this is a guy, his last name is Lindsay, and he was a bomb tech, and he was senior, already deployed, didn't have to deploy. And he's like, no, you're having a kid, I'll deploy in your place. Something along like that. I don't know the exact story, but he walked into a room in Syria, kaboom, quadriplegic, no voice. And the Navy can do all it can do for him, but it can't fix that. That family, the kids he has, his wife, who now has this totally new mission. And they're always going to be on the edge of survival and quitting. And he's at times wanted to, because I had him on the show, I had his wife on the show. And he's like, yeah, there's times when I just want to die. Even if I go to Disneyland and my kids are having a great time, I'm trapped. And it's horrible, right? And so who has the right to send anybody into a situation where he stands up and says, I'm a leader, I'll go, you stay, and then now we have to pay this cost because we were in Syria. Okay, justify that. Not you, but how do we justify that to anybody? You know?
Well, listen, and I'm not necessarily advocating for being in Syria. Let me be clear on that. And in the film,
Of course, and I'm not putting that on you.
in the film, I argue with Joe about it. And I love his response. I love our conversation because it is the conversation to have. But how do you justify? You don't. I'm trying to think of something else you said that really struck me. You talked about these human interactions and that being a very important part. And I think there's just something that's really interesting there. The second time I went back to Iraq, my first night I embedded with a National Guard unit. And it was ironic because I actually found in their Michigan National Guard, and I found that they were actually really good at the human interaction part.
Mm.
The company commander, who was a father, husband, had kids back home, knew it's kind of effed up that I'm standing in a man's home at 2:00 in the morning while my soldiers go through all of his possessions looking for IEDs and whatever.
Right.
So it might be a good idea for me to stand here and apologize for being in his home.
Yeah.
And he handled it beautifully. And he explained to them what they're doing, which that doesn't always happen even with soldiers within our own army, right? Much less talking to it. So he's sitting there saying, I'm really sorry. You guys have an election tomorrow. We've heard reports there might be some IEDs in the road. We don't want anybody to get hurt. So we're searching all these houses. The other thing they were doing, which was really cool to be on the mission, was one of the guys was going to tip him off about stuff. But they had to go hit 5 houses so they didn't single him out and get him targeted, by the terrorists. So I just found that to be really interesting. They were a little bit older. Okay. Yeah. It wasn't the same as the LURS guys. There were 18, 19 paratroopers, all that. Yeah. But what they had more was that life experience. They had a lot of life back home.
Yeah.
Which actually played very well in that type of engagement. The other thing you said that's really interesting is, my brother Isaac, this is what motivated the film. In his second deployment, he was in Fallujah. He was infantry officer, but he was the civil relations officer. So he was there to rebuild Fallujah. Yep. Now, Isaac has an engineering degree from West Point, so he's got some of the basics, Sim City. But that's literally what he's going off of in his mid-20s.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm sure he did a great job. He's a very smart guy, very dedicated. But it does beg the question, where is the department that handles the rebuilding of the country? Right. Where's the Commerce Department? Where are the entrepreneurs? Where is that aspect as a government to look at like all this ecosystem that has to be rebuilt?
Right.
This economic thing, when the unemployment rate's 20%, when you disband the Iraqi army and all the guys that know how to use weapons no longer have jobs, and somebody from another country's offering $100 to go shoot at Americans, like what's going to happen here? Like you got to kind of attack that issue as well.
Yeah.
In World War II, one thing they did, the other issue I have is that I've been told you didn't have 1 year war in Afghanistan, you had 21-year wars.
Worse than that, but yes.
So, and what happens? You got a new general. Well, what do we do in World War II? I keep going back to World War II because I'm like, we did this before, and we're still in these countries, and they're like allies of ours, and they're some of the best economies in the world. You look at Germany, Japan, Italy, where we were for this film, where they love us. It's really interesting to me. And if you look at that, we had, MacArthur was like the governor in Japan because he knew the area. He'd been there almost his entire career. Marshall came up with the Marshall Plan. They rebuilt Germany. They got them jobs, rebuilt their infrastructure. And I think that we need a little more of that. We needed more of that in Iraq. We needed more of that in Afghanistan. My brother Joe talks about it literally in the end of the film. He says, look, they still have running sewage in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
He's talking about that. Like, how does somebody buy into that if that's their situation? And he's like, you've got to rebuild the country. You've got to, those are some things you have to focus on. And I think it's a lot to put all that on the military, quite honestly. And
an 18-year-old, like I love LURS guys. I was in a military intelligence unit that we had a LURS. They call themselves a regiment, and by flag they probably were, but they were attached to a bunch of spies and interrogators, right? And they were rowdy. And when we deployed to Bosnia, they didn't really have a job because you were going to lay on the side of a mountain and count tanks. And God bless, like that's important work in the right kind of fight, but they didn't have a fight. But you could get those guys trained up to do anything, and they would give it 100%. And if they weren't a ranger, they were desperate to become one. And these are real hard dudes, right? So we have the capability there. But what we don't do is take your brother. I'm hard on civil affairs because I've worked with these guys. They help give me a ride to get out, and we all work together in the same problems. But what they think they accomplish and what they actually accomplish are not the same thing.
Yeah.
And most of them are not licensed to do the thing that they do. So yeah, you can have a degree in construction management and all those things. That doesn't mean you don't know about construction, but you don't know how to do construction in Iraq. You don't know how to not screw up this village from that village because you built something here. You don't know how to compel that contractor to build the building properly. So when I go through that building 4 years later, because I've been in the same area for years, and I'm like, look at all of these failed American projects.
Oh, wow.
That are relics. Or this was the police station. No, this is Bob's house. I'm like, well, it was a police station, and we have so that 20-year thing, total amnesia as to what happened before. And so one of the things I would do is pull the slide decks out from the previous units. Let's build a police station, but it's all the last police stations we've talked about building and built. Do whatever we want to do, but what are we going to do? And that is the crazy thing is you have to be a certain rank to be able to withstand that critique. And captains can't handle it. Captain and below can't handle it. They just think that I'm a crazy person, But the majors and up are like, oh no, that's right. We built a police station in whatever place they were before. I don't know if it's there, and they get it. But nobody above them far enough up cares to get it. And so we build the same police station. We ask the same stupid questions. And so this all goes back to that moral injuries. If we're going to be there, if your brothers are going to go, if these guys are going to go back and back and back, don't expect us to not see the failure. To do the things. I mean, ask anybody who's ever trained Iraqis or Afghans how to shoot. And they'll be like, yeah, I trained them how to shoot. Sort of the next unit. And they never got better, apparently, because you all trained them on basic rifle marksmanship. Either they can shoot or they can't. Why are we never getting past lesson 2 and getting into more things?
Well,
and in some cases,
they got a little better. That one I
Right.
can comment on. They got a little better because in the film we go back to that moment. But in Brothers at War, I embedded with Iraqi unit. Those are Marine advisors working with them, and they were they were past the crawl stage and they were kind of at the walk stage. I wouldn't say they were running. But you talked about some of the funny stuff in combat. And so when I was in combat with those guys and they got hit with an IED and there's lots of small arms fire, you see in the film, you see a couple guys that are totally locked down. Their target allocation, they're really focused, they're really paying attention. I pushed in and got a close up of that. I think it's in the film. It was super bizarre. I mean, it's like if we put it in there, people wouldn't believe it, but because it's a document. This one guy was like running on the road. And my producing partner, Norman, was like, what is he doing? I go, Norman, that's what I was saying. I was saying that while we were filming. What the fuck is he doing? He looks like Rambo. He's putting this belt and he's like, and they had to pull the helicopters off. So I was in a firefight where literally we had 2 of the same thing that you're talking about happening in the same firefight. You had one guy doing exactly what you want him to do, looking really high end. He's got cover. He's looking where he's firing. He's aiming. He's firing. We're getting shot at, so it's a good time to shoot back. And another guy that's just like, spraying and praying, doing the death blossom. So, I've seen both. But I definitely will tell you that the Iraqi army did get better over time.
Sure.
The idea that General Petraeus had to put the American units with the Iraqi units, I thought that was genius because I saw that happening earlier in 2005 when I was there in 2006, because I was like, okay, you get the cultural competency of the Iraqi soldiers, because I saw that coupled with the Marines who knew what they were doing and were military advisors. So these guys were former drill instructors. These were like high-end warriors, highly trained, frustrated sometimes with the people that they were training, for sure. And you see that in the movie too. But that works. That idea of of training them. I saw that part work. The civil affairs and rebuilding Iraq, I wouldn't know as much because I didn't have a chance to come back and inspect the building. But everything you're saying sort of tracks there. And what you're expressing, you see in Brothers After War. Because you see me asking these questions, and you see me at the end of the film after a 2-year journey around the world, reconnecting with these guys. I go, are we getting better at this? I asked my Joe, I'm sitting on a bench in Italy. I'm like, are we? Because I'm concerned that we're not.
Right.
And he talks about, in his mind, he thinks that we are learning a little bit, and I hope we are. But I felt it was really important in the film to be authentic and truthful. And it couldn't be the essence of the film, because the essence is the people,
Right.
and that journey,
Right.
and that loss of identity, and the going from a war fighter to the veteran, right? That's the essence of Brothers After War. The humor, the pathos, the ethos, the spirituality, all of that. But I did think it was important, and in the course of the film, woven into it, that you do see 4 different policy decisions examined, and hear about it from the veterans' point of view,
Right.
how they feel about it,
Right.
the impact on their life, which I was very passionate about including,
Yeah.
and held the line on. Even though it's my film and I have final cut, you know, sometimes that stuff is not, some people would say, the most dramatic or whatever, but I did think it was important for us to reflect back on that
Sure.
after 20 years of war.
Yeah. You have to, and I appreciated that you did it, and you brought up a lot of things that made me either think or identify with what the folks you featured had to say. I thought about your brother, who was a commander who didn't get picked up for colonel, I think it was full colonel, and I thought, you know, what does it take to get picked up for full colonel? You know, and I don't know your brother's record, and I'm not trying to get into all that, but to do that, to go and give your best, and it seemed like he was a commander when he's there. So if you're a commander, you're ahead of your peers if you're deployed in a combat zone. And so to not do that, well, I can point out a lot of colonels who failed to accomplish anything. And not because they were bad, but because they couldn't. There's 4 basic parts to a mission, right? Close with and destroy the enemy, protect your force, enable your enablers, and teach and train the local government officials. That's basic sketch. Well, they failed at all 4 of those line items. And they got promoted to general, you know, and then general again, and way up the chain. And I saw a lot of failure. So I think about your brother's career, and why not your brother? You know what happens, and who gets above. And it's just, I struggle with all of it when I see all of us trying to sort out our own version of this. And I forget who it was in the film, but it's like, would you let your kid go in the military? And they're like, absolutely not. You know, and I'm the same with my daughter. I wouldn't, when she was having that struggle that all young people do, trying to sort out what was next. Like, I'm thinking, my daughter, her parents, her stepdad, her mom, and her dad all were military people. And so she's like, why don't I just join the Army? And her mom and I are like, no. I mean, maybe down the road, but you need to stick to whatever you're doing now, because the Army hasn't, and I'm saying the Army because we were Army people, the Army hasn't earned the right to bring in another generation to go out and do this. You know, we can't keep sending people to places where we know they're going to get broken, damaged, have to go to the VA for the rest of their lives for whatever reason, minor to life ending, to accomplish these losses. There's too many people that are over their career to be asking for new people. And so we got a new way to approach it now, and we'll see what happens in the future. There's no comment on that, but there's too much losing to continue to grab our young people and say, hey, this is the thing you need to do.
Listen, I've been really passionate about and focused. The majority of my work in the last 15 years has been on helping our young men and women that come back from deployment make sense of it.
Yeah,
I mean, we created a workshop around the original film.
Yeah.
I created a journal because journaling helped me. There doesn't seem to be a lot of energy and effort. There's some great training in the military, not always around the resiliency, not always about the reintegration. It's kind of like a check the box kind of thing.
Yep.
And so for about 50,000 folks, I mean, we were doing thousands at a time, would go and still just even a couple months ago, I worked with 600 soldiers back in the Middle East, Minnesota National Guard called. And we play the film, we get them deep in their feels, we then do some journaling and some group discussion, and we like help them walk through these major life events and allow them to open up if they're stuck, allow them to talk, teach them how to process these experiences, tell them don't shove it in the filing cabinet and hide it away. That is not a recipe for success. We talk about moral injury.
Yeah.
We talk about how moral injury is different than post-traumatic stress.
Sure.
We talk about ways you might be able to navigate that and make better sense of it.
Sure.
We don't do emotional band-aids and platitudes and all that stuff. And I think that's really, really important. And I think you are hitting on something that's actually a truth that we have to take a hard look at as a society and get better at. And that is, how do we help these people reintegrate into society?
Yeah.
If you give your all, you go overseas, the mission is what the mission is, it's imperfect. you come home, there's degrees of moral injury, there's degrees of feeling like you abandon I mean, there's all kinds of complicated stuff, and there's nothing really in place to sort of help you sort through that. And that's very different than the ancient Greeks did. The ancient Greeks created theater, didn't exist, created theater to help warriors explain what war was like and what coming home from war was like. And they said coming home is when the war starts.
For sure. For sure.
Right. And you say that with such conviction. That was an emotional response that you had from that, right? That struck you as true. And yet most people don't know that. And that was to the very essence of this movie. I've had people say, I never understood what vets were saying when they said coming home is the hardest part. Yeah. But I got a sense of that in this film. You captured some of that. I saw that was actually tougher for them than being with their brothers and sisters overseas and fighting and feeling like they had a purpose, and then coming back here and feeling like they're abandoned, don't know what to do, don't know the purpose, haven't been trained for this part of life, and are kind of lost. So I just want to say, like, I really identify with what you're saying. I feel like so much of what we've been doing, and frankly, the blessing of the Gary Sinise Foundation for supporting it and actually allowing it to be more than just me. I've got 3 trainers. One of them has moral injury and a doctorate of social work. He's a bit of an expert on that. That's why I know a lot about it. Yeah. You know, as a team, we're attacking the issue head on. Good. But we're one team.
One team.
We're going to do 5,000 folks this year, and they're going to have a great experience. But even then, that's a move in the right direction. But I think, to your point, you know, the American Indians had ceremonies where the elders / veterans would take the young braves into a tent. They would do the things that would help them hallucinate, you know, the sweat lodge, etc. You'd have visions, which is kind of getting out of your body. Think about what you've gone through in a bigger sense, the symbolism of it, the bigger essence of it. And then they'd have a ceremony where they walked and the villagers would lay hands on them. And the purpose of that was the village said the sins you committed were on our behalf, and we are now absorbing them from you. Yeah. And then they would be allowed to touch the children again. So there was this communalization of it. There was this, we are a community. You are one part of our community. What you have done is also part of what we have done. We are here for you. We are physically and as a community here for you, welcoming you back home. Yeah. And it is powerful.
It is.
And I think we got to get better at it, because I think too many veterans feel isolated, disconnected. True. You know, they had a purpose, and now they come back into a society that feels very disconnected, very purposeless sometimes, and they feel lost. Yeah. And I think that's part of, you know, what are we seeing? We see a suicide rate. We've lost 5 times more vets to suicide than we lost killed in action. We lost 120,000 vets in the last 20 years, 35,000 from the war and terror. Yep. Like, to me, this is saying something to us.
For sure.
And we need to listen, or the next generation, which you saw in the film, not all of them, some are ready to send him. Grundy's ready to send his kids, but Ben Fisher is not.
Right.
And I, to your point, you know, as a filmmaker who sits back and just lets it all wash over him, and then puts the truth out there for you to absorb and comment and discuss, I go, where are we when the Ben Fishers, who've been fighting for America since the Revolutionary War, say not my kids?
Yeah. And didn't his dad say the same thing?
Yes. Who fought in Vietnam.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Yeah, it's a problem. Yeah, and there's a lot you said in there, and I do want to transition into more of a positive vibe. So I love the workshop idea. And we're in a very nice part of LA County. Very, very nice part. So any kid who's from here goes out, gets himself a degree, deploys for a couple of years, and it's like, I've done my time. I don't want to do military stuff anymore. What does that highly qualified person get to do when they come back? You know, and so, I mean, I had a lot of credentials, and I use me as an example because it's not hard to get my credentials. I've got a couple degrees. I've done well, right? But when I stopped being in war, I was in my 40s. So of course I had a lot of experience. And I went to the standard, like, hey, we help veterans get jobs. And I'm like, I don't need a lot of help. I don't need help with resumes. I don't need help with, and I'll take it, but I don't need help with applications. Those are the kind of jobs that I need. And I'm like, well, how much do you think you need to make out? And, I live in Orange County. And I said, well, it's Orange County. And I'm mid-career. So, 120, 160, something like that. And I'm like, whoa, what are you talking about? And so I use this area because same thing. Like, some kid who comes back with a degree, and you're like, why don't you drive a forklift? Like, you are not computing with that person. You're desperate to help this person, but you have no idea their credentials. They asked me, well, how many applications would you fill out a week? I'm like, 100. But I'm not looking for a job job. I'm looking for someone to say, hey, we can use this guy's help. Just let me know who the CEOs are who are interested in people like me, and I'll go handle the rest if you guys can't handle it. And I put them into a box. I'm like, if you can't help me, it's okay to say, Pete, we can't help you. But you have to have the courage to say that to me. And they couldn't. They didn't have the courage to say it. They could not help me. They did not help me. But they didn't have the courage to say it. And so you think about that. If you're unmoored with your relationship, because that happens a lot for us. If you end up spending all of your money because you're a little bit wild when you come back, or you don't make that much in the first place. So now you have no money. You have no woman or man in your life to help ground you. And if you have no professional guy wire, well, of course, death is an option.
Yeah, I mean, Pete, you're really hitting on something very important. And it's honestly, making this film made me a better brother to my brothers.
Yeah.
Both of them. It was told in two different ways to them when they came out. And Joe, special operator, 9 deployments, would tell you if he was sitting next to me that 3 months was the hardest period of time ever. Now with Joe, what I said to him, and now Joe had gotten his college degree, got an MBA. I said, Joe, take a piece of paper out and write down from 1 to 10, what do you want to do?
No.
Because what he was going to do was probably use Klaus to get on his and do, the personal finance thing, which is great, but not what he was really interested in doing.
Right.
So he wrote down investment banker, private equity, commercial lending.
Yeah.
And then relationship banking was down here, right? Well, guess what? I said, start at number 1 and go down. Investment banking, got to move to New York. His wife got into Duke for nursing, so couldn't do that. Cross the list. Private equity. Been in Chicago, we might be able to pull some strings and get him in somewhere. But they were like, you really need some commercial lending before we're going to look at you and you be a serious contender, because that's a big element of doing these deals is the commercial lending aspect. Number 3, commercial lending. He goes balls to the walls trying to find a job. I knew he needed my help. He was smart enough to know he needed it. And so I mentored him. I mean, we talk 3 times a week. Why is this guy getting back to me? Because he's a vice president and he's busy and he's got 2 wife and 2 kids. He gets 200 or 300 emails a day like I do. Dude, he's doing you a favor. Follow up. You're not a master sergeant anymore. With a ranger tab on you. Okay. Like, you got to write a nice, hey, thanks so much again. Remind him, and he'll probably push you over to human resources. The 20th thing he does that day. And so that really helped him. And he did, he kept at it, and then he got a job. And he got a job in commercial lending, focused in agriculture, which is what he wanted to do. He's now been promoted. Now he's now a vice president, relationship banker. So with Isaac, completely different approach. I said Isaac, because Isaac now is a second master's, 2-time battalion commander, ran ROTC at the University of Virginia. They're offering him security contracts to run small armies in other countries. I mean, like corporate America.
They want to promote him, but the Army didn't.
They saw the skill set. But that's not what he wanted to do. I was like, what do you really want to do? What makes you happy? He likes to be outside. He likes to be in the outdoors. He likes to play in the dirt, to be quite honest with you. I don't know why. It's not for me, but I mean, I'll go do it if it's the higher good. But like, so he has started his own company, heavy machinery, forest, like reforestation stuff. Like, he's also doing landscaping, also doing fence building. He's got a little niche there in Charlottesville. The big guys don't want to come out that far. He's loving it. I mean, sometimes with him, it's like, how much did you spend on that machinery? Did you do the cost analysis? I mean, thank God he got an MBA, so he understands, because he just wants to buy those big tools and get to work, you know? But he's so happy. You see him on those machines. He's so happy. He got back to what makes me happy. And because I said to him, I was like, you'll figure it out. If you start with something that fills your heart up a little bit. So what I would say to anybody coming out is first of all, do a gut check and go, what do I really want to do? Secondly, if you'd ask me, Pete, what should I do? I'd say, well, you should go to those CEOs and you should offer to buy them lunch. Offer to buy them lunch or a cup of coffee. Totally. Hard for them not to say no to that. Have lunch with them. You've had this fascinating life and career, and say, I'm trying to figure out what I should do next. And I thought I would pick your brain. I thought I'd ask you for your advice, and get their advice. Talk to them, create relationships. Take time to figure out what you want to do next, to meet people like that. What do they recommend? Look for some mentors, look for some people. And then once you discover what you want to do or an opportunity surfaces itself, go for all in, because sometimes what happens with vets is they go, I want to make 160 grand. And the person behind human resources eyes roll into the back of their head because they go, oh my God, that's like so hard to get to, on day one. What I always tell veterans, I say, look, start at the bottom, but start at the bottom where you want to be. Figure out where you want to go. And what you don't understand about the civilian world is if you walk in, even if it's driving a forklift, you're going to be early, you're going to be mission focused, you're going to understand how to fit in with the rest of the team. In about 3 weeks, they're going to see, this incredible gift of you are. They could promote you in 3 months, 6 months. I've got a ton of veterans that told me like they got started at the bottom. Within a year, they're in management. And then a couple of years later, they are making that kind of money because they have all those intangibles that they learned during the course of their career. But what I say to them sometimes is, listen, I've been there when they're clearing houses. I've even been in the stack a couple of times, which was really exciting because I needed that shot. You guys are highly trained. You don't throw someone in there on day one and just say, go ahead and go clear it with the Rangers. Navy SEALs, you just started, we'll just throw you in there. No, you have to train your way up to that. So I said, you've never built a bicycle. Why would they have you run the department that makes it? Go learn how to make a bicycle. Then they'll promote you to be vice president of manufacturing because you understand all the other things that you need to promote someone to a leader. But you got to understand the basics of what the business is before they can really push you to the top. And I think that people that embrace that and tend to do very well.
Yeah, no, you're right. There's a lot to be said about going back and reinventing and getting to work. It's also fair to say that if your brother, the commander, applied to any fill in the blank corporation and wanted to work for $35,000 a year, they'd be like, yeah, not a chance, no way, because he's overqualified for those jobs. I find a lot of military people that are in between things, and a lot of us don't know what we're going to do. But let's get off of that because we only got a few minutes left. Brothers After War is fantastic. It really resonated with me. If you have someone in your life who's a veteran, I definitely recommend you guys watch that film. It's streaming right now and doing very well. It's killing. There's a link right there. You guys can go find it. You guys know how to find these things. Just type in Brothers After War, and then it's going to come up, and you're going to push the button, and it's like $5 or $6 or something like that on Amazon. By the way, if you click the Amazon link that I provided, I even get a little tiny taste of that. So that's a good way to support the show. Who cares about that? What I care about is that you guys watch this. If you're trying to get veterans, watch this. Watch how this family deals with grief, deals with departure, all the things that come from going to war, so we can all have a better idea of why so many of us struggle so badly. I have my own things that I have to deal with, and gosh, it's I don't want anybody else's problems for sure, but I only just have enough to kind of stay on top of my little powder cake that I've got, And so if someone has 5% less capacity than I do to do that, they'd be in a lot of trouble, and I think about how hard it is. It's one thing to run 5,000 people through a program because that's incredible, right? But you're going to pick up, I don't know, a small percentage of those, and you're going to absolutely help those people. So how do we get those other people that get caught up in the sieve and can't get to the next thing? I know we're all desperate to try to figure that out. And I think Brothers After War is a great way to kind of understand and relate to who we all are.
Peter, I want to comment on that because listen, that's 100% true. Look, if someone can spend 4 hours with us in a group setting, we're going to crush it. Even then there's programs like Warrior Path, which is 7 days long, which is a deep dive. There's other therapies out there that are really great that, you can really get in and do a deep dive. You can work with a therapist. There's so many great things to do. But I was really passionate about, first of all, we put it in movie theaters. We had about 15,000 people see it. I thought it was pretty cool. I wanted them to experience as a community. I know that there's some science and some just, for them to come together and not be the only one that is feeling that way, to see someone left to the right, laughing at me at the same time, but also then kind of maybe experiencing some of that. We asked vets to see themselves in the 12 veterans that are in this film. It's really the story of the veteran as told through 12. My two brothers.
It's so good.
I appreciate that. No, I mean, I think we do nail it. I mean, worked really hard to try to capture that. They were very generous with their stories, but I'm passionate about this being available on all these streaming platforms because I know that that's 5, maybe 10,000 we work with a year, but hundreds of thousands, if not 1 million people or more, it's really endless, can see it in their home. And I know the reason why I got started on those was because Gary Sinise and I were in Fayetteville, North Carolina, Jacksonville, North Carolina, Columbus, Georgia, and military couples came up to us after my first film and said, we just had our first real conversation about his or her experience after seeing the film.
Yeah.
So that's what started the whole, the whole thing. That's why this film was created. We know that movies make tough subjects easier to talk about.
Yeah.
If someone has 5% less capacity than you, or just the same capacity as you, a film that you can see and go, I relate to that. I relate to that chief's struggles or some of the moral injury he's expressing.
Yeah.
I relate to that, not that lieutenant colonel didn't make colonel. I relate to the guy who deployed 9 times. I relate to his frustration. I love the argument. Like there's something really powerful happening there because you're realizing I'm not alone. Maybe words are articulating feelings you have.
Yeah.
If you want to talk to somebody in your family, now you don't have to start from Adam and Eve to try to explain to them how you think and feel.
Yeah.
You have this shared context. Now you can fit in your details and your specifics. So now you have more empathy, more understanding.
Yeah.
My other goal, and that's why I want on these public platforms, and that's why I talk to like-minded people, people from our tribe first. But my dream and my hope is that it's successful enough that people start clicking on it and checking it out outside of our community.
Right.
And what does that do? Well, that makes me go, I had no idea. And we've had people, I have people on tape saying this. I had no idea the level of sacrifice, the service. It touched my heart.
Yeah.
It made me see veterans differently. And I feel like if we could do that for our nation, then all those things you talked about, maybe we can make an impact on that. Maybe we can move the needle. Because what I want is when you reach out to that CEO, and I think a lot of Americans want to help, they just don't know what to do. He goes, oh, Peter, come, let's grab lunch. What do you need? How can I help you?
Right.
And my God, I saw this film and I understand, like, you guys are incredible. What you went through, can we talk about it? You talk, you open up, and then he's like, all right, what can I do? How can I help you? That's what I want for our vets.
It's a big thing. And I guess I would say this too. Another thing that you talked about, I know we're going to get a little bit long here, but we'll be done here in a minute. When we look at the things that were in the movie, one of the, it might have been, I'm not sure who it was, you'll tell me, but they talked about how, like, don't thank me, thank my daughter. My daughter and I, my daughter's birthday's tomorrow, you know, and we don't have the kind of life we would have had if we would have grown up together. It was funny. At one point, the CIA and I were talking about me going and working clandestine services. And I'm like, I don't want to miss out on my daughter's life. Turned out I did. I missed her. Her mom did such a great job raising her, right? But she was the one that had the scary dreams. She, didn't have a connection with me. Like, we're very close, right? But we don't have that closeness that I see other parents have with their kids because they were present. And that sacrifice often goes completely unnoticed because we don't realize what it means to have a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old who maybe talks to you on the phone once a week, and they can't put it all together. And I'm so glad you covered that because it is a big thing to manage, and for two parents. And I don't call Jennifer my ex-wife. I just said it's Brenda's mom. She's wonderful. We get along great. We're all family. So we were able to manage that stress, but it wasn't easy, And I think about my daughter, and I don't get too like how it could have been, but it's a real sacrifice. And we don't often think about the kids and the spouses and what they have to give up in careers, all kinds of choices, so they can be terrified all the time because we went out on a patrol, and then you don't call because you don't want to scare them or say the wrong, and it's a lot. And I'm so glad you put that in the film.
Yeah. I mean, we kick off the film with that, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many people relate to Isaac when he opens up in the movie. And Hunter actually was the one that wanted to talk to me. That kind of shocked me. And the first 30 minutes was kind of all over the place. And I was like, why'd you want to talk to me? Like, my cameraman was like, how's he going to get out of this one? He's been there with me in Iraq. And I said to her, why'd you want me to talk to you? She goes, I want people to know what it's like to have your dad deploy 4 times. And it was just from there, the truth. And it was just from her heart. And her dad
was brave as hell. It was so hard for her. It makes me emotional.
She never said that to anybody.
Yeah.
I had to get permission from her to tell her dad that she had nightmares. So she never told me. No, they didn't know that. Right. She kept that to herself. And so for me, the film was really important from that aspect, just even on a personal level, to kind of share that military child truth with a parent.
Yeah.
one thing I would say is something I say to parents is like, well, first of all, what you're saying is really true. You know, this sacrifice that so much of our generation gave and not being there for those moments, and maybe a little bit of a separation they feel between themselves and their children. Isaac's beautifully articulates it. I mean, it's the second time I've seen him cry since my brother died. You know, and the first being when my brother died was when he says it takes 6 months to be dad again.
Yeah.
And I've seen my other brother Joe go through that. You know, that's what led him to leave the Ranger Battalion and to go back into, you know, the regular army, where we catch up with him in the movie. It's such a huge, it's the biggest sacrifice in many ways. And, you know, one thing I say to parents though is to try to just be in the present with where you are and then lean in and make it better. I've seen in my own family, my brothers fight through that. I had in the first year of my son's life, I only saw him for 6 weeks, and he didn't recognize me when I came back to Prague, and I was in the middle of an international custody battle. So I had someone trying to push me out of his life. And I was so grateful for the experience of making the film, because I saw my brother have to start over again with his daughter and her crawl away and not want to be there with him. And so I knew to just be present, to lean in. It's okay. I'm going to recreate this relationship. And the reality is that the children want that relationship, right? So we as parents, if we are just accepting of that and we accept some pain on the front end, if we lean into the pain a little bit that we feel, we oftentimes can cover some ground and create more intimacy and more time and more present with that child that we want to be more connected to, you know, if we allow it. And it's almost like we don't want to like hold on to don't let, what is it, perfect be the you know, the enemy of good, you know what I mean? Like whatever that saying is, like, it's like if we can like continue to improve that relationship and get closer, because the reality is, even when you're, you know, I have 50-50 custody with my kids right now. I have to keep relearning my kids. And I'll say this, a final statement. I was doing a seminar. I was in Kansas. I was working with an air guard, and this woman who's about 22, 23 shared this beautiful, she said, my father was gone all the time when I was a kid growing up. He deployed 4 times, but he was gone a lot more. He was a pilot, probably doing some of this. He was probably working with you. And she said, but we're really close, and I love him. I was like, okay, Phil, share with us. How? Tell me what he did. Because we want this to be the situation with our daughters and sons, right? And she goes, he always tried to keep learning me because I was changing. And he would come back and try to learn who I was then. And that effort to continually try to relearn me, I love him. I mean, in the end, he did. I'm proud of him, and I feel like we're pretty close now, even though they're all those years apart. So that would be my suggestion to anyone who finds themselves having been away for a big part of the last 2 decades.
God, so much time away. Well, listen, we're going to be out of time right now. So I wanted you to wrap up. Any final words before we go?
Yeah, I would just say Brothers After War. You can see trailers for the film. You can see you can find out where you can watch it. It's on it's on DVD. It's also streaming all over the place, iTunes. It's on Amazon. And then we have a very active community on Facebook, Instagram. You can tell us what you think of the film. And then if you think that Brothers After War seminar, you'd like to have it come to your community, reach out. You know, info@brothersafterwar.com, or you can go online and fill out a little thing on there and tell us that you'd like us to do that. We see all those, we read them all, we respond. And we're building out our calendar for our impact campaign for the next 12 months. So if we get enough demand in your city, we will bring the Brothers After War seminar to a movie theater in your town as well.
There's a link right there for that. The other links are in the show notes. Just check it out. You guys do me a favor and go check that out, and recommend it to a friend. This is how we spread the word and get things out there. Brothers After War, and actually watch Brothers at War too. You'll enjoy that one as well. Thank you, Jacob, so much. I appreciate it. We're going to wrap this thing up, and I will talk to you in a moment.